Hello, Booknerds. Welcome to the Booknerds podcast. It's the weekend, and to be honest, the Booknerds team couldn't have asked for a better author or a better book to kickstart the weekend. As well as, let me just get to the core of what we are going to do today. We are going to discuss this wonderful book. It's called Tata Stories. It's all over LinkedIn, getting rave reviews. I was checking out the Amazon reviews, sir, and it's just incredible how people are flowering, showering 5 stars all the way. So congratulations on the book, first of
Thank
all.
you. Thank you, Rohan. Thank you very much. And
And
delighted to be on your show. I'm a book nerd myself.
wonderful. Welcome to the community. I really wanted to tell everybody. Although you are a biggie on LinkedIn, you were selected in 2019 as a top voice. But still, I would like to tell everybody a little bit about you. Mr. Harish Bhat is the currently the brand custodian at Tata Sons. He has held many roles in the Tata Group over the past 34 years. It's incredible, sir. Managing Director of Tata Global Beverages, Chief Operating Officer of the watches and jewelry businesses of the Titan Company. And in fact, this morning we were discussing about a Titan, manufacturing facility in Dehradun, where we are based from. He's of course an alumni of BITS Pilani and Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. Of late, you have received, an distinguished alumnus award from BITS Pilani. I'm sure that must have felt really good, because that always is, wonderful
Yeah.
when your alumni, kind of acknowledges you. Mr. Bhatt is an avid marketer, and I'm so excited because I'm so bad at marketing. I wanted to pick his brains about marketing, and he's also a columnist for the Hindu Business Line and Mint. I told you he has been selected by LinkedIn as one of the top voices. He's a foodie and a fitness freak, so you've got it all covered. And writing this book, of course, Mr. Harish Bhat has written other books before this. You can check them out on Amazon. If you go to I'll link this book's link, in the comments, and you can check this out and other books as well. It's the occasion of JRD Tata's birth anniversary, 118th birth anniversary, of course. What a man. A 30-45 minute session won't do him justice, but we'll try, sir. I really wanted to quote from the book. It's on page 114, and then I'll ask you my questions.
Page
Uh,
114. Okay.
Yes, it's the last paragraph, and it's just hit the right spot for me. There is no doubt that vision and purpose, once clearly defined, constitute the most important north star in the life of any organization or individual. Whether it is JRD Tata, you, or me, our purpose motivates our actions, even though finding our life's purpose is often a long and arduous search. Blessed are those who have found their purpose, because their beacon then shines brightly. I mean, this can evolve into a book in itself. Thank you so much for this paragraph. Tell us a bit about the genesis of the book, because you have written others as well. What was new and exciting while writing this one? And of course, a bit more about how the Tatas, kind of encouraged you to do this.
Yeah. So, Rohan, firstly, thank you for having me on your show. It's such a pleasure to speak here and pleasure to speak to lovers of books who are listening to the show. Thank you for inviting me. Uh, Tata Stories evolved really specially, Rohan. When you're an author, you can never put your finger on how exactly a book evolves. Books evolve in different ways.
Yeah.
Some books evolve when you're traveling, some books evolve when you're in solitude. Now, this book evolved at the start of the pandemic. India had gone into a lockdown on the 21st of March 2020. And you remember those first few weeks of the lockdown? All of us were caught up in our own homes. We didn't know what has hit us. We were isolated. We were not able to go out to restaurants, not able to go out to movies, not able to see our friends. I can list things, on and on and on. So I thought to myself at that time, and I was of course saving time on traveling to office and back. You are very lucky to live in Dehradun, In Bombay, we spent so much time traveling back and forth. So I
Right.
saved the time and I said, why don't I use the time I have saved to write a few stories which
Yeah.
inspire people and which make people's moods much brighter during the
Right.
time of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I said, what better stories do I know? I've worked in the Tata Group for 35 years now. So let me
Yeah.
write stories about the Tata Group
Right.
and stories which can inspire people even in these dark moments of the pandemic. That's the way the book began. And the very first story that I wrote was the story of Lady Meherbai Tata, who is a legend unto herself.
Yeah.
He used to own the sixth largest diamond in the world, and you need to read this book to understand what she did with the diamond and why it was the
Yes.
more luckiest diamond in the world. But I put that story on LinkedIn. I went to
Yeah.
LinkedIn and I put the story on LinkedIn. Just a few months before that, LinkedIn had said I was a top voice, so I said, let me see what I can do with that. Let me put the
Right.
story there. And I got response which I was not anticipating at all, Rohan. There were
Yeah.
hundreds of people who commented on the post that
Yeah.
the story inspires us to be with like her, gives us new motivation in our life.
Yeah.
Someone said, I've read the story out to my daughter. Someone else said, this story is discussed on our dining table. So when I saw comments of that nature come in, I said, maybe the story is hitting a sweet spot, and let me write a few more. So I started writing the story of Dr. John Mathai, some stories of of JRD Tata that you see here, other stories of Tata leaders like Sumant Mulgaonkar. And typically, my wife and I would go out for an evening walk with our masks on. That's what our society was permitting us to do. And
Yeah.
I discussed with her the theme of the story I had put up yesterday. And that's how these stories started evolving. At that time, I had no idea I was going to publish them as a book.
Yeah.
So the stories went on LinkedIn. They received exceedingly good reviews on LinkedIn. And then my publisher, Penguin, spoke to me and said, hey, why don't we put these together as a book? So that is
Yeah.
the genesis of this book. But the question you asked me on the support I got from the Tata Group, very, very important. The Tata Group is a very nurturing group. The Tata Group has encouraged me to write over the past several years. Um, and has provided me access to the Tata Central Archives and to people within the group whom I can interview and speak to. In fact, I wrote my first book sitting in the library of the Tata Management Training Center in Pune. I don't get time to write on weekdays, so I take weekends to write. Weekdays are
Yeah.
for my work as a brand custodian or earlier as a chief executive officer, etc. I
Yeah.
use weekends to write, but the Tata Group is very supportive and very encouraging. I would say not just of me, but of many people who want to pursue their passions.
Great, sir. I That's incredible because if you look at it, a lot of I don't like the word, but if you call them capitalists, would kind of discourage that. In fact, because it will, the common sense would be that if you're working on something else, then you would be taking kind of distracting yourself from your core work. So that is very different and
On
evolved.
the other hand, Rohan, because I love writing so much,
Yeah.
the ability to write over the weekends
Yeah.
actually makes me even fresher when I start the new work week.
Wow.
And I think, if anything, companies should encourage people to pursue their passions alongside their work.
Yeah.
Because I think each of us should have a passion which could be adjacent to our work or outside our work. It'll
Yeah.
actually make us much better in the workplace.
Awesome. I really wanted to ask you about a part of the book which was very interesting for me, and I wanted to discuss conscious capitalism with you because that is the running sort of theme over the years. And and I quote from the book itself: "We did not have to create a lake and plant trees to produce a truck, but we did. What I'm most proud about is not the making of steel or trucks, but our social concern, which
Yeah,
is quite incredible and evolved at that stage. Even now, most business owners or entrepreneurs won't think like that. They would first think about not the nation. Let's get some, let's return the money of the investors, so as to say, before anything else.
No, you're right. So, the lake you're referring to is the lake which is next to the Tata Motors factory in Pune,
Yes,
an
yes,
artificial lake which was created at the same time the Tata Motors factory was created so that there was enough green cover. And it was created by Sumant Mulgaonkar. But the spirit of conscious capitalism and giving back to the community goes back to the times of our founder Jamshedji Tata. Okay, Jamshedji Tata founded the Tata Group in 1868, and the first company that he founded, Rohan, was a
yeah,
company called Empress Mills in Nagpur. It was a textile mill. Uh, it became a very profitable company. He used long staple cotton. He used innovations like the ring spindle. It became one of the most profitable companies in India.
right,
Uh, but that is not what made it special. And you're talking of returning wealth to the shareholders.
right.
I'm told in 10 years, shareholders got 20 times their wealth back. So it
Wow.
was a hugely profitable enterprise.
Yeah,
But some of the things that Jamshedji Tata did in this unit
yeah,
are what made it successful in the long term. First and
right,
foremost, in the year 1887, he introduced in these mills, and who used to work in these textile mills, in Empress mills? These were semi educated or uneducated women and men.
yeah,
He introduced for them in 1887 a pension scheme for the first time in India.
right,
In 1895, he introduced an accident compensation scheme from them.
yeah,
And in 1901, he introduced something that all of us who work in any company would be aware of. He
yeah.
introduced for the first time ever in India the concept of the Provident Fund.
Okay.
Now, someone asked him, or someone must have asked him, why are you spending all this money on welfare?
Hmm.
You can really add it back to the profits. And Jamshedji Tata answered. This was his answer, and I'm reading this out from my book.
Yeah,
He said, "We do not claim to be more unselfish, more generous, or more philanthropic than other people." Look at what he says. We do
yeah,
not claim to be more unselfish, more generous, or more philanthropic. But we think we started on sound and straightforward business principles, considering the interests of our shareholders our own. So, shareholders' interest is paramount,
right,
and the health and welfare of our employees, the sure foundation of our prosperity. So, what he says is when you prioritize the health and welfare of your employees and that of the community, you're
yeah,
creating a foundation for prosperity and profitability in the future and
right,
not just today. That is the overriding philosophy with which he
yeah,
took the Tata Group forward. And he said, we need build a company where the community is center stage and not just another stakeholder. In the Empress Mills, he created creches for the children of working women. More than 120 years ago, he created crashes came up in the 1920s. Provident Fund and pension came up, as I told you, in the 1880s and 1901s.
yeah,
He created schools for night schools for the workers. He
yeah,
created gymnasia. He had pictographs to entertain the workers late evenings.
yeah,
So all this was adding back to the community, and then they also started a girls' school in Nagpur.
yeah,
Empress Mill started a girls' school, but that belief became larger and larger, Rohan, in his mind. Eventually, his sons and he contributed a large part of their equity shareholding of Tata Sons to public charitable trusts. Even
yeah,
today, therefore, the Tata Group is owned by the Tata Public Charitable Trust, 66% of the Tata Group. And that is the those are the trusts which have contributed to starting up the Tata Memorial Hospital in Mumbai for
hmm,
cancer, or
yeah,
started the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, or the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, or
yeah,
the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, or even the most recent fight against COVID 19.
yeah,
So that's the history of conscious capitalism in the Tata Group, and
yeah,
I've captured that in a few stories in this book. In
yeah,
the introductory story, which is the first story, as well as in Sumant Mulgankar's story, in the Tata Steel story, in the Okai story. There are many inspiring stories you'll see in this book, which are to do
yeah.
with giving back to the community, but at the same time running very competitive, profitable enterprises.
Yeah, that's an amazing balance that one needs to achieve. In fact, that is so evolved. We hear about cool startups kind of providing those facilities like crutches and etc. etc. in 2022, and we are excited suddenly. All of a sudden, this is so new, And again, I read in the book that it was back in early 1900s. I was like, okay, this is not so new. This has been done. So it's amazing. On that count, I would also like to remind everybody who's watching that there's a giveaway going on. Mr. Harish Bhat has kindly, agreed to giving out a signed copy of a book, customized signed copy of the book to the best question that comes out of this conversation. And I think we have a question as well. So can we take that, sir?
Of course, you can take a
Yeah.
question. No problem at all. Please go right ahead. I'm very happy to answer questions.
Yeah. So Hardik Bhatt says that I don't want India to be an economic superpower. I want India to be a happy country. This is the most famous saying of JRD Tata. It must be a great learning for the younger generation who is running behind the money and fame. Behind money and fame, what is your personal opinion on this statement?
Yeah. So, what I would say is this, Hardik. Thank you for that question. It's a very interesting question. See, the purpose of wealth is eventually happiness for our people, and you need a certain threshold level of wealth to be happy, no doubt about it.
Yeah,
To take care of all your needs, you need a certain amount of wealth for sure. But beyond that, I think being a happy country is what, when you become an economic superpower or when you become a wealthy country, if it is divorced from being a happy country,
yeah,
then you're not going to live in peace at all.
yeah,
So what JRD's motive, JRD believed strongly in the same philosophy of our founder, that you need to earn wealth for your shareholders. That's very important.
yeah.
But the higher purpose beyond that is to ensure that people are really happy and enjoying their lives. And in his view, that was the purpose that we should actually lift ourselves to as we go along.
Amazing. We have another question by Deepali Gangwar, and she's asking, how did you synchronize all the 40 stories together to make a fabulous book? I think she has not read the book, but she's saying that where did you get the idea and how did you manage to compile all stories? As it seems very difficult. I think the book is a must read book for all. It's a question and sort of suggestion to everyone.
Yeah, Dipali. So that's an interesting question. How did I get the 40s? What connects all these? When you have to bring stories together in a single book, there has to be some connecting glue to them.
Yeah,
And in this book, there are three connecting ideas. One is the idea of the Tata Group. So all
yeah,
these stories are about the Tata Group. The
right.
second is all of them are about nation building, about giving back to the community and nation building. And why did I use this idea? Because I think it can be a very inspiring idea for young India. All of us want to contribute to our nation. We
Yeah,
are looking for ways of doing it. And this book gives you 40 different ways in which the Tata Group has contributed to the nation. And of course, many of these stories are about breaking new ground, about doing something new. India's
right,
first steel plant, India's first car,
right.
indigenous car, India's
Yeah,
first airline, and so forth. So, those were the connecting glues. How did I compile unknown stories? I think
yeah,
that's a process of research, Dipali. I
yeah,
partnered very closely with the Tata Central Archives. I had a
yeah,
very good partner there in Mr. Rajendra Prasad Narla, who is the chief
yeah,
archivist.
yeah,
So I used to request him to send me papers related
yeah,
to, the history of the group, the JRD, the Jamshedji Tata, and then I
right,
would extensively read those papers till I
right,
came across a nugget which I thought could make for an inspiring story. Then I would deep dive into that nugget and try to establish more facts, and
right,
then write the story out. Okay,
yeah,
and Dipali, when you write a book like this, I was not thinking of all the 40 stories at the same time. I
yeah,
was only thinking of writing my next story.
yeah,
So I think it's really important to break it into small parts as you go along.
yeah.
Because if I started with the idea, oh my God, I need to write a book with 40 stories, I would probably have been overawed by it. But
I
one
know.
story at a time is, what should I say, is biteable, one story at a
Yeah.
time. Okay, so
Goodness,
I
sir,
went,
that's such great advice, because just to break it down into small, sort of, very short stories, and Dipali, these stories are short and you can easily digest them. Like within 10-15 minutes, you'll get over them.
yeah,
And yeah,
yeah, so that's quite right, Rohan. when I wrote these stories, you're very right, they're short stories. Short
Yeah.
stories have been associated with fiction. So I said, why can't we have short stories from the corporate world? So these
Yeah.
are short stories from the corporate world, but they're very
Right.
human stories. Okay, they're not like business stories. They're stories of human achievement, human failure, human dreams,
Yeah.
the kind of dreams that all of us have. So they're very human stories, and every story, Rohan, can be read within 6 minutes.
I
I
think so.
had
My timing was wrong because I finished the book, I think 40 stories, right? And I was like, I think that would have been my average. You know what you have said, 5 to 6 minutes. That would have been my sort of average time. And that's why I found it very interesting because obviously the books are competing with Netflix these days. So we
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of,
that's true.
have to write them in a way that it is very easily digestible for everyone. In fact, I have just begun to write my own book, and which I never thought I would
Wow.
write. But I am inspired by that to just break it down into kind of, and all the writers as well. You should do that. Sir has given a very valid sort of, suggestion.
Yeah.
I think there is before the next question, sir. I wanted to discuss the chapter which was extremely exciting for me and most adventurous, the race. And that is something I would say that there can be an adventure series based on that chapter alone. So tell us a bit about that, and it's very exciting. Obviously we won't be discussing all the stories because otherwise people won't buy the book. They have to
Yeah.
buy the book to read all the chapters.
No, no, no. I'm very happy. If we had time, I'm very happy to narrate all the 40 stories. I love being a secretary. I love being a storyteller. But the race is a beautiful story, and it's a little known story. Not many people know of it.
Yeah.
So, Rohan, when JRD Tata was 25 years of age, he came across an advertisement in the London Times. And the advertisement said that His Highness the Aga Khan
Yeah.
is offering a prize of 500 UK pounds
Yeah.
for the first flight from England to India, from India to England by a person of Indian nationality. It should be a solo flight. It should be completed in 6 weeks from the date of starting, and whoever flies the fastest will win it. So JRD was excited because JRD saw this in the year 1930. Just a year earlier, in 1929, he had got his pilot's license. So JRD said, I'm an avid flyer. I would like to go and fly. JRD actually had the pilot's license number one in India. Will you give me a minute to just take a glass of water, if you don't
Please,
mind?
sir. Yeah.
So that's what JRD did. He wanted to fly this race. That's the title of the story, the race. Okay,
Yes.
and JRD applied for this contest. He decided to fly from India to the UK
Right.
in his small aircraft. Now, two other people took up that challenge. One person was a gentleman called Manmohan Singh,
Yeah.
who was an enthusiastic engineer,
Yeah.
and the other person was a Parsi gentleman called Aspi Engineer, who was also a very avid flyer.
Okay.
Manmohan Singh and Aspi Engineer decided to fly from England to India.
Right.
JRD decided to fly from India to England.
Right.
And they had to time their flights
Yeah.
with logbooks and recorded at every airport. And the fastest flyer would get 500 pounds. Remember, this was 500 pounds in the 1930s. It would be worth
Lot of
100
money.
times that amount today.
Yeah.
So JRD flew from Karachi. He started from Karachi, and it was a very, very, arduous route because you had to fly over the deserts of Iraq. You had to fly over sultry swamps. You had to fly over marshes. And when you're flying alone, if you have to land in any of those areas, it
Yeah.
will be very lonely. You may get surrounded by tribals.
Yeah.
It is a very arduous and dangerous route. But he decided
Right.
to do that. So JRD Tata took off from Karachi and started flowing towards Jask on the coast of Iraq.
Okay.
He went towards Basra, drifted a little bit, went to Baghdad, and then
Yeah.
went towards Cairo.
Yeah.
Manmohan Singh unfortunately lost his way. The flight lost its way, and he was not able to make it in time. So Manmohan Singh kind of got knocked out of the contest. He could
Right.
not fly in the 6 weeks required.
Mm.
But Aspi Engineer actually started the other way around. He started from England, flew over Libya.
Yeah.
There's a place called Benghazi in Libya.
Okay.
And as he was flying over, he noticed that the spark plugs of his aircraft had developed a fault.
Yeah.
So he could not fly further because spark plugs are important for the engine to work well.
Right.
So he actually landed at in a Abu Bakr airstrip near Alexandria in Egypt.
Okay.
And he asked the airstrip people, "Can I get other spark plugs to replace these?" There were no spark plugs available at the airport. They had to go somewhere else and get the spark plugs.
Right.
So Aspi engineer waited there very patiently for the spark plugs to come. Who knows? They may take several days to come
Yeah.
for spark plugs which fit his aircraft. In the meanwhile, JRD Tata had also reached towards Cairo, and he was also redirected to the Abu Bakr Air Base. When he
Wow.
landed there, he saw this aircraft standing, uh, and he immediately knew that this must be my competitor, Aspi engineer, who's landed here.
Yeah.
And indeed it was. So he went and asked Aspi engineer, "What are you doing here?" And Aspi engineer turned to him and said, "Listen, I was flying from England to India, taking part in the same race as you, but my
Yeah.
spark plugs were giving me trouble, and here I am now waiting for new spark plugs to come. I don't know how
Yeah.
long they will be." So
Right.
JRD, and this is what JRD tells, uh, about this. He says, um, when he heard that I had landed, he came out to the aerodrome to meet me. I asked him what he was doing there. He said he was waiting for some extra spark plugs since he had not taken an extra set of them. That was not very good planning. And then he says, since mine was a four-cylinder aeroplane, I had eight spare plugs. I
Yeah.
said, why not give four to him? And I gave four of those spark plugs to us, the engineer. He was so pleased and grateful that he insisted I take something from him, and he gave me his May West life jacket. He had a May West but no spark plugs. So Aspi engineer got his spark plugs from JRD Tata.
Yeah.
And, and Aspi engineer was able to fly off immediately towards India,
Yeah.
and JRD Tata took off from that airport and moved towards Paris in France.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, JRD Tata landed in a military airport in the evening because of very strict rules he could not take off.
Right.
And by the time JRD Tata had landed in London,
Yeah.
Aspi Engineer had already landed in Karachi.
Yeah.
And Aspi Engineer had won the race. JRD Tata lost the race to Aspi Engineer by 2 hours and 30 minutes.
Wow. So that is the difference, kind of because he helped him, you know.
That's right, because he helped
That's
him.
why.
But like they say in India, kahani ab bhi baki hai mere dost. There is still
Hari
story
hari
left.
baki hai.
Many years later, JRD Tata had become the chairman of the Tata Group. This is now 1930. Now I'm talking 1957.
Right.
27 years later, JRD Tata was the chairman of the Tata Group. And where was Aspi Engineer? Aspi Engineer had joined the Indian Air Force, and he
Okay.
had become the Air Vice Marshal of the Indian Air Force, the
Wonderful.
second highest ranking person.
Yeah.
Later on, he would become the Air Chief Marshal.
Okay.
And Aspi Engineer wrote to JRD Tata saying, Air India was just completing 25 years. So JRD Tata, Aspi Engineer wrote to JRD Tata congratulating him on Air India becoming 25 years. And JRD Tata wrote back a beautiful letter to Aspi Engineer saying, when we were much younger, we competed against each other. You were only 17 or 18 at that time. I took you so seriously as a competitor. I know you won the race, but our friendship since then has been more worthwhile than winning the competition would have been. And he tells us, P engineer, one of the highlights that remains is when I landed at Karachi by Imperial Airways. He went to London and then he came back. Aspi
Right.
engineer met him with a platoon of scouts and with a medal, received him with a medal.
Wonderful.
And that medal was for JRD's fair play in giving those spark plugs to him and
Right.
generosity. So here is a man who helped his competitor. JRD Tata helped us, P engineer, lost the race but won a friend. And my question, therefore, to all of us, Rohan, through this story
Yeah.
is winning all that matters?
yeah,
Or is it worthwhile to win all our battles in life at any cost? Or is it far more important and meaningful to help someone, to bring
yeah,
a smile to someone's face whenever we can and along the way, to nurture friendships that stand the test of time, which make our lives all the more fulfilling?
yeah,
I know all of us will search for our own answers.
yeah.
How
It's
much to
it's an
focus on
incredible story.
winning and how much to focus
Yeah,
on helping. We will
yeah,
find our own balance in life. But when we reflect on this beautiful story, both
yeah.
great men of our times, an Air Chief Marshal and the chairman of the Tata Group, I
Yeah.
hope this story holds some lessons for all of us.
Yeah. In fact, just digressing, because this is such an inspirational story, if ever there was, because winning is everything right now. And I was in the office of. I hope you know about the Himalaya brand. Who makes like is in FMCG, and I
Yeah,
was in
yeah,
the
yeah.
office. Yeah, I was in the office of the founder, and I saw a picture of Baba Ramdev there, and they are competitors, right? And I asked him. I couldn't resist. I mean, I was very nervous in his office, and I shared with him that. So why do you have his picture? He's your competitor, and he's like, it's fine. It's fine. We can all be in the same sort of sector, flourish together, and that's when I realized that the best leaders, don't get into all that sort of mindless. What should I call it? Competition.
Yeah, yeah, that is true, Rohan, because we live in a large country. The
Yeah,
opportunity space is very large. In any given market, you can have multiple brands, multiple companies competing with each other,
yeah,
uh, and your competitors in the marketplace. But beyond that, you're also building an industry.
right.
Both Himalaya and Patanjali are building the
Yeah,
same industry. You know,
right. Yeah,
same industry in naturals and the same industry in health and wellness.
yeah,
So they're part of that same industry, but they're still competitors in the marketplace, and I think that's
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
All of us compete with our. I used
Right.
to compete very, 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 very aggressively with Hindustan Unilever when I was in Tata Tea,
I know. Yeah,
with our tea and coffee brands.
right.
But I also have a lot of respect for Hindustan Unilever outside the marketplace. They are a fantastic company. But
Yeah,
I take great pride in Tata products, and in the marketplace, if I'm a marketer, I will compete tooth and nail with them.
yeah. There's a question. I think it's more personal. Let's see what Vishwas has got to say. It's been 35 years since you joined Tata, but I really haven't heard any story on how your journey started with Tata. Was it immediately after your graduation from IMA? What role, which Tata company? I want to hear more about that. That's an interesting one.
Yeah. So, in this book, there is only one personal story. The rest of them are all stories where I am the narrator and
Yeah,
not one of the protagonists or not one of the actors.
yeah,
But Vishwas, to your question, you haven't heard too many stories on how my journey has progressed because I think it's too early to write my memoirs.
right.
Uh, at this there are so many inspiring stories from the Tata Group itself to narrate.
I know.
But when did I start? I started in the Tata Group in 1987, immediately after my graduation from IIM Ahmedabad. I was recruited by the Tata Administrative Service,
Yeah.
and I've been with the group ever since. What was
Okay.
my first role? My first role was as executive assistant to the joint managing director of Tata Tea.
Yeah.
But later on, I went on to become the executive assistant to the chairman of the company, Mr. Darbari Seth. And the last story in this book is a very, very endearing story of what happened when I was his executive assistant and some of the most beautiful lessons that I learned from him. You will
I have a
find them.
question to that, sir. Actually, I wanted to ask this at the end of the session, but regarding the last chapter, there's a section, it's called Keen to See Your Daughter, which is very heartfelt. I know there are other things like you were on so many assignments with him and cracking those big deals. There is a funny story also when you almost burnt up a house or an apartment, which is very funny. But I would leave it at that. People should read that story. But let's go to that story. In fact, first, I really wanted to know what happened. If you could
You,
tell
you want
us.
to, you want to hear the story about my daughter or about the funny
Both
story?
actually, both are very fascinating. You can pick and choose. I mean, you. I
So,
really
so
want to know what happened in that apartment, because that is so funny. And kind of, because there was this,
yeah, so
very serious meeting going on.
I'll tell you what happened. I was a young guy at that time. Okay, this was 1992 or 1993. So I must have been 29, 30 years of age at that time.
Okay.
Darbari Seth was the chairman of our company, and I was a young deputy manager.
Yeah.
Like way apart. He was right at the top, and I was here all at
Right.
the bottom rung of the company,
Right.
or the second bottom rung of the company.
Yeah.
So I used to, as his executive assistant, I used to travel with him often.
Yeah.
Um, he was more than my father's age. He was probably around my grandfather's age. He was 72, 73 years of age at that
Okay.
time. He was a very dominating personality, very, very dynamic, um, very inspiring and visionary. He had built brands like Tata Tea and Tata Salt. He had built companies, and I would travel with him. When I Once when I was traveling with him to London, he invited me to stay in the same apartment where he was staying. It was in a hotel called the St. James's Court, which is part of the Taj Group.
Okay.
And they have these two-bedroom apartments. So Mr. Darbari said stayed in the master bedroom, and there was a smaller bedroom which I occupied.
Yeah.
And early morning, I used to make a cup of tea for him and for me,
Yeah.
and then he would read. He would have his tea with the newspaper, and the day would start by about 9 o'clock or 9:30, with various meetings lined up, sometimes visits lined up. Now, on and there used to be a small kitchenette also in the department where you could do some basic cooking, like boiling eggs or
Yeah.
toasting bread or
Yeah.
making tea and so forth. So, on one day, a very important visitor came to visit Darbari Seth. I don't remember who he was. He was a European.
Okay.
He came in and he brought a big briefcase. They took papers out. They sat in the living room. They took papers out. They
Yeah.
started studying some blueprints, must be for some new project. And they also left the door half ajar but slightly closed.
Yeah.
And of course, it was a confidential meeting, so I could not go in there. But I went to the kitchen and started preparing my breakfast. And I still remember on that day, I decided to have toast and banana
Okay.
and a cup of tea. So I put the bread into the toaster, and then I think I was either looking at the tea or no, some other part of the kitchen, and unfortunately I forgot about the toast. And you know what happens when toast gets overcooked? It starts burning.
Right.
If there are any crumbs left in the toaster, then you see smoke coming out.
Right.
And that day, a lot of smoke came out of the toaster.
Yeah.
So when smoke came out of the toaster,
Yeah.
it went out of the kitchen into that sitting room as well, where these two gentlemen were sitting, the Bari Seth and his visitor, and discussing stuff. And also it went, and there was an alarm which sounds when the smoke alarm goes off.
Yes. Yeah.
I was panicking here. I was panicking because my chairman is sitting in the next room, and I have just
Oh
engineered
my
a
God.
disaster in the kitchen. And the hotel people came up after 5 or 10 minutes. They shut off the alarm, but by then the smoke had gone all the way into the living room, and I'm sure it must have been bothering them. I panicked and I didn't know what to do. The meeting went on. I kept very quiet, and later in the morning, Darbari Seth and I were due to drive out into the town. So I thought, my God, what if I thought he's going to really give me a
Right.
hiding now, because in the middle of an important meeting, I had no business to mess up his meeting like
I
that.
know. Yeah.
But throughout the journey, Darbari Seth kept quiet. Once or twice he looked at me and I think his eyes twinkled, but he never raised the issue of the bird and the smoke with me. And,
Oh my God.
you know, in a way, I think that had more impact on me, Rohan, than if he had raised it.
Yeah.
It has stayed on in my mind because he was able to make the same impact on me by not speaking as he would
Not
have
speak.
done by speaking.
Yeah.
Perhaps even more of an impact.
Right. It,
And that's something that I have borne in mind as a lesson all along. You work with teammates, sometimes teammates do well, sometimes there's a
yeah.
mess. here and
Yeah.
there. But you can the messages you send can be in different ways, and
Yeah.
sometimes if you're dealing with a responsible individual, then
Yeah.
not pulling them up may actually be more worthwhile than pulling them up.
It's an
Very
incredible
good point.
learning. I mean, our team also, it's a very small team, 10, 15 people, but sometimes emotions get the better of you, and it's an incredible learning right there. We have a question from Minakshi. She's
Yeah.
asking, we know GRD Tata as the father of Indian aviation. He's the man behind the Tata Airlines, currently Air India. A man with humility. How can one bring in more and more humility in one's personality and business operations to serve humanity? And a follow-up question from me is the attention to detail that he used to give to his speeches, which was quite incredible when I read about it, and the story of the toilet roll, which,
Yeah.
which
So,
it's incredible.
humility, Minakshi, that's a very good question. Humility comes about when you have respect for other people, and when you also know that you don't know it all. You're learning along with other people. And the humility comes across when you're able to, shall I say, subdue any arrogance that may be building up within yourself.
Okay.
And JRD Tata had a lot of humility and grace to his leadership.
Yeah.
And because of that humility, he ensured that he was always respectful to people. He did whatever work needed to be done. And it didn't matter what the kind of work was, which brings me to the toilet roll story, actually,
Yeah.
Rohan. And Minakshi, I'm going to narrate that story for a minute. So,
Yeah.
JRD Tata was flying on an international aircraft,
Yeah.
Air India, of course, but flying to an international destination.
Yeah.
And sitting next to him on that flight was India's senior IAS officer, LK Jha.
Yeah.
LK Jha used to be governor of the Reserve Bank of India. He used to be secretary to the Prime Minister of India. And suddenly JRD Tata vanished from his seat. LK Jha said, "My God, where is this man gone?" 10 minutes passed, JRD was not back. 20 minutes passed, JRD was not back. 45 minutes, no JRD. 1 hour, no JRD. JRD returns to his seat after 1 hour and 10 minutes, and LKJ asks him, "Mr. Tata, where were you? I was getting a little worried." So JRD Tata tells him, "Mr. Jha, I was roaming around the aircraft. I'm chairman of this airline, so I go around to see if everything is okay." So LK Jha tells him, "That could not have taken an hour and 10 minutes, Mr. Tata." So JRD says, I actually went into the loo, into the bathroom, and I found that toilet rolls were not placed properly, so I wanted to do something about it."
Yeah.
So LK thinks to himself, that could not have taken an hour and 10 minutes. How long does it take in one toilet to put the toilet roll right?
Yeah.
And then LK Jha is amazed to see what has transpired when he speaks to the other crew in the aircraft. What had happened was JRD Tata had gone into a bathroom of the aircraft and found that the toilet rolls were not placed right. So he took them out, he placed them right and placed them perfectly with all the edges bent and whatever you had to do for a
Yeah.
toilet roll to be well placed. And then he went to every toilet of that Jumbo 747, to the large aircraft, and
Wow.
placed the toilet rolls properly himself. And
Wow.
his message was very clear that every job is important. Whatever we do, we should do to the best of our ability and do exceedingly well, and not in a second rate manner.
Yeah.
And despite being the chairman of the company, he did that to send a very clear message to people that,
Yeah.
excellence in whatever we do, however
Yeah.
small that job is, it may be placing a toilet roll or it
Yeah.
may be a large job like flying an aircraft. Either way,
Right.
it should be excellent
Yeah.
and never be second best in what you do.
Yeah.
So that is also an example of JRD Tata's humility, because he did not call someone else and say, "Now you place it right." He
Yeah.
did. He went and did it across all the toilets, despite being the chairman of the company. Uh, but
Can yeah.
back to your question, I think humility is a very good trait for leaders to have, because when you have humility, you put arrogance behind. You don't become arrogant, and when
Yeah.
you have humility, you can deal on even terms with everyone. Someone who is well below your rank or someone who's
Yeah.
well above your rank, I think You find it easier to deal with them. And when you have humility, you don't let success go to your head. You always remain balanced, even if you're in the crest of success or on the trough of failure.
Yeah. We have hit the 45 minutes mark, but we'll take one last question if that's fine with you.
That's fine by me.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Let's take one final question. Uh, uh, Tata's legacy, Anvesha Guru is asking, Tata's legacy as a trusted brand has been etched in the hearts of all Indians. What are the crucial tenets in building long term trust as a brand?
What a wonderful question, Anvesha. Thank you for asking it. Yes, you're right. The Tata brand is very trusted across the country and enjoys the trust of more than 700, 800 million Indians. More than 700 million Indians use some Tata product or the other today. Tata Salt, Tata Tea, Titan watches, Voltas air conditioners,
Yeah.
Tanishq jewelry, Tata cars, Nexon cars, Tata trucks. So I can go on and on. Uh,
So you asked me, I'm so sorry to cut you off, but you asked me about brands, right? And now I'm remembering all the brands because there are so many. It's across the
No,
board.
no, but I wanted you to remember spontaneously. So what you did was absolutely right.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
there are many Tata brands, but what builds trust, Anvesha? One, when you do what is right by the community and the nation, when you keep contributing to the community around you, that builds trust because people know that you're a good brand if you're contributing to the community. These days, you talk about sustainability, you talk about contributing to the environment, you talk about being carbon neutral. All those
Yeah.
elements are about contribution to the nation and the community. And I think that builds a lot of trust because you trust someone who is doing good to others.
Right.
So that's one element. The other element that builds trust is knowing that these people do business in a good and fair way.
Right.
Knowing that, this brand is not going to cheat me. This brand is not going to, take advantage of me. That also builds trust. So doing business in a fair and ethical way, I know that I'll get the right price from this brand. I know
Right.
that this brand will provide me, uh, uh, will do business with me in an ethical way. The
Right.
third thing that builds trust is the quality of products and services that you sell, Anvisha. That finally, consumers are not going to come back and buy your products unless your products are of very good quality. So the quality of your products and services is critical to building trust.
Right.
So it's, being in harmony with the community, doing business in an ethical manner, and products and services of excellent quality. These, I would say, are the fundamental blocks on which a brand builds trust with consumers.
Great. I have so many questions, but let's go because we have a lag of time. We let's go. It's the Book Nerds podcast, sir. So, any book recommendations which you would like to give, in fiction and non-fiction,
Plenty,
which people can pick up?
plenty of them, Rohan. I am a book nerd myself, like I said. The book that I'm currently reading is very engaging. It's a book called Open House, written
Yeah.
by the advertisement guru Piyush Pandey. It's a Penguin publication.
Yeah.
And it's a beautifully written book about his voyage in the world of advertising and the lessons that he has learned. I would strongly recommend it to anyone who wants to learn about the world of creativity and advertising.
Yeah.
Very simply written, also,
Yeah.
as only Piyush can do. So that's one book which stands out in my mind. The other book, which is not from the world of business but is from the world of fiction, which
Yeah.
is my all-time favorite, is Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude. I return to reading it every year. I think it's a
Yeah.
fascinating book, so very well narrated.
Yeah.
Uh, there is a book I've read since childhood, but I would like to continue to recommend it to everyone who wants to read something which is very
Right.
imaginative and creative, which is Rohan, none other than Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland.
Alice in Wonderland.
It's a beautiful book.
Is
Beautiful
it
book. It
fun?
opens my mind each time I read it with all its, imaginative concepts,
Yeah.
including the Cheshire Cat, including the
Yeah.
Walrus and the Carpenter,
Yeah.
including Alice herself,
Yeah.
including the Queen of Hearts and the King of
Yeah.
Hearts. It's wonderful.
It doesn't
Um,
get better. To be honest, it doesn't get better.
yeah, that's right. And if you're looking for a good business book,
yeah,
in the recent past, one of the books I've enjoyed reading very much is this book called Think Again by Adam Grant,
yeah.
which actually makes hypothesizes that sometimes your first thought may never be the right thought.
Okay.
You may need to go back and uh,
Say you're muted.
you may need to go back. You may need to go back and think again
Right.
before you come to a conclusion on whether your thinking is right or not. So,
Yeah,
Think Again is a good book. So, if there are four recommendations I want to make today, it's Open House by Piyush
yeah,
Pandey,
yeah,
100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Alice in Wonderland by the one and only Lewis Carroll,
yeah.
and Think Again by Adam
Okay.
Grant. And of
Awesome.
course, I would be delighted if everyone on this call, everyone listening to us, also decides to pick up Tata Stories and read it. I'm
Yeah,
this has been a labor of love for me, but let
yeah,
me assure you that if you read this book, it's not just Tata stories. These are stories of the human spirit. These are
right.
stories of success, failure, dreams that people had, how
Yeah,
they achieved them, stories of nation building. It,
yes, sir.
these stories, I think, will inspire us and provoke us to do a little more with our own lives.
Yeah,
And as I mentioned in the book, Rohan, as a reader has mentioned, not me, these are not just corporate short stories. They can be bedtime tales for yourself,
yeah,
for your partner, for your children. They can be tales that can be discussed on your dining table.
yeah,
So these are tales that you can use them in a number of ways.
yeah,
And I would of course be delighted if people attending this talk were to
yeah.
decide to read this book by whenever they wish to.
I can vouch for it, and in fact, most of our team has already picked up this book, and even before the session, they picked it up and they were like recommending me. "Sir, आपने पढ़ी है कि नहीं पढ़ी?" मैंने कहा, I was like, in this day and age, everybody's young, and when they recommend, they mean it, because it is not every day that people recommend books now. So it is amazing, and thank you so much, sir, for sparing time on the weekend. I know you should have been kind of writing or relaxing, but you took out time. Thank you so much. And being on the Booknerds podcast, we are expecting so many books out of you in the years to come. And this one is truly special. Guys, pick up a copy, leave your feedback on Amazon, on LinkedIn, where sir is very active. You can send us feedback as well, and we'll kind of route it further to sir. Also, we need to announce the giveaway winner at the end. If we can decide right now, it's fine. Otherwise, we can
Yeah,
decide
so
later on.
Rohan, I think you should decide.
Okay.
You have been anchoring the show. You should
Okay.
decide, and if you can send me the name and address of the winner, then I'm
Yeah.
very very happy to courier across a signed copy of Tata Stories.
Okay, sir. I think Anvesha's question was amazing, and I'll try to get her address and route it to you immediately.
Oh,
Uh,
wonderful!
yeah,
So
Anvesha.
congratulations to Anvesha Guru. I hope you can give us your address so that we can mail the signed copy of the book to you, Anvesha.
Yes,
Would you mind
Anvesha,
doing
just
that?
DM the address to us, and your copy will reach you. It will be customized and signed by the author. Thank you so much, sir. It has been wonderful. Looking forward to so much more. We just scrapped the surface of this book, and it's just a preview. I had
Yeah.
so many other questions. Like, if you look at my notes, it was like all over the place. But
Yeah.
we need to
So
take
that's
the
wonderful.
community's question.
That's the way our notes are. Notes are meant for scribbling before they become before
Yes.
they become well
Yes.
rounded stories or well rounded questions.
But sir,
So
my
thank you.
learnings, my learnings as an entrepreneur are primarily what I think. So Minakshi also asked, humility. By staying that way, we can perhaps grow even better, and have empathy, perhaps. So yeah, that's my learning from this book.
But Rohan, let me just thank everyone at the Book Nerds team, to you and to your entire team at Book Nerds
Thanks.
for hosting this show and
Thanks.
for inviting me here. It's been such a pleasure and privilege to participate on this show with a set of people who love books. I want to thank everyone who's participated in the show. Thank you for your interest in books. Books are our window to the world. And I hope all of us on the show read more, and you know, as we read more, open more windows in our mind. So thank you,
Thank you.
Rohan, and
Thank
thanks
you very
to
much.
all of you who are on the show just now. I really, really enjoyed responding to these questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Looking forward to having you on the next book as well. And till then, happy reading and happy writing to you.
Thank you, and a good evening to all of you. Have a nice Saturday evening.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, sir.